The woman on mile marker 223. It happened on a freezing January night in 2018, on a long, empty stretch of Interstate 70 in eastern Colorado. The plains were covered in a thin layer of snow, and the wind blew hard enough to make the highway signs tremble. I was hauling a refrigerated load from Denver to Kansas City, running solo, half awake, half numb, just wanting to finish the night shift without trouble. Around 2:40 a.m., somewhere between Limon and Burlington, my dashboard clock flickered twice, as if the power inside the cab dipped for a second. At the same moment my CB radio hissed with static. I remember tightening my grip on the wheel. There were no other vehicles on the road, not even distant headlights. Just darkness and wind. When I passed the green sign marked 223, something moved on the right shoulder of the road. At first I thought it was a deer. I slowed slightly, squinting through the snow mist that swirled across the asphalt. But when I got closer, the shape became clearer. It was a woman. Barefoot. Wearing a long, thin nightgown that whipped around her legs in the cold wind. Her hair looked wet, stuck to her cheeks, and her arms were raised as if she was trying to wave someone down. I eased off the accelerator and my instinct screamed to stop. But something about the way she stood, too still, too pale, made the hair on the back of my neck rise. I rolled past her, and for a split second, our eyes met. Or I thought they did. Her face was white as bone, no color, no warmth, no sign that she should even be alive in that kind of cold. I checked my mirror as I passed. She was gone. Completely gone. There was nowhere she could have run to. No ditch, no trees, no buildings. Just an open field that stretched for miles. I kept driving. My heart slammed against my ribs. I forced myself to breathe slowly, telling myself maybe I had imagined her. Maybe fatigue was getting to me. Maybe it was a trick of the snow. But 1 minute later, just beyond the next slight curve in the road, I saw her again. This time she was standing directly under the next mileage sign. Frozen in the exact same pose, arms lifted, hair stuck to her cheeks, staring straight at me. My hands shook on the wheel. I knew I had driven past her. There was no way she could have gotten ahead of me. My CB crackled suddenly, startling me so hard I jerked the wheel. A voice came through, but not a driver's voice. It was thin, broken, like someone speaking through water. One word, stop. I slammed the volume down. My pulse hammered. Something felt very wrong. My truck felt colder than it should have been. My breath fogged the air. The heater was blasting, but the inside of the cab felt like a refrigerator. I pulled onto the shoulder at the next safe spot and called the highway patrol, telling them I thought a woman was stranded on the road and might be in danger. The dispatcher kept asking me to describe her clothing. When I said a white nightgown, she went silent for a few seconds. Then she said, "Sir, are you near mile marker 223? I confirmed I was close to it. Another long silence. Finally she said, "We've received similar calls before. There's no one out there. Stay in your vehicle. Officers are on their way." Her tone wasn't dismissive, it was uneasy. Like she already knew what I had seen. And she didn't want to explain. I stayed in the truck, lights on, engine running, trying to keep my breathing steady. After about 5 minutes, something tapped the passenger side window. A soft, slow tap. 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 I froze in place. I didn't turn my head. Didn't want to. But the tapping continued, a slow rhythm that didn't match the wind or the vibration of the idling truck. Finally I forced myself to look. Nothing was there. But in the reflection of the glass, for the briefest moment, I saw a shape behind me, a pale face, hair hanging, empty eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. I spun around, and the cab was empty. The space behind the seats was empty. No one was there. But the cold in the air became sharp, almost stinging. I couldn't get warm no matter how high I turned the heat. When the patrol car finally arrived, I stepped outside and tried to explain what I saw. The officer didn't laugh. didn't roll his eyes. Instead, he asked me a strange question. Did she look wet? I said yes. Completely drenched, as if she had walked out of a lake. He nodded, almost sadly. Then he told me a story I didn't expect. 3 years earlier, a young woman had crashed her car near mile marker 223. It was winter, dark, and she had gone off the road into a drainage ditch filled with icy water. She tried to climb out but died from exposure before help could reach her. Several truckers had reported seeing her since then. Some saw her waving. Some saw her walking along the highway. Others, like me, saw her appear ahead of them even after they had passed her. It only happens in freezing weather, the officer said. She seems to appear when conditions match the night she died. He escorted me back to the truck and suggested I get some rest at the next town. I agreed. But before I left, curiosity forced me to do one more thing. I checked my dash cam footage. The camera faced forward, showing the road and the shoulder. I scrolled to the moment I had first seen her. There she was, clearly visible on the right side of the road. A tall, pale figure in a soaked nightgown. Her face was turned toward the camera. But when I slowed the footage, when I zoomed in a little more, my stomach twisted. The face wasn't quite right. The features were too smooth. Too empty. As if they were smudged or washed away. Then I checked the clip when she appeared ahead of me the second time. Same figure. Same pose. Same blank face. But the worst part was the final clip, the moment when I was stopped on the shoulder and heard the tapping. The interior camera caught a reflection in the passenger side window. Not an object. A face. Pale, blurred, tilted slightly as if trying to peer inside. The reflection didn't match anything inside my cab. And as soon as I blinked, it disappeared from the recording. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I drove until sunrise, stopping only when it was bright enough that I could clearly see both sides of the road. I never drove that stretch at night again. But sometimes, when I'm on the CB late at night, I hear other truckers talk about a woman in white who appears near mile marker 223. Some say she waves. Some say she walks. Some say she screams. I only saw her twice. And that was enough. The end. The CB radio whisper. It happened on a deserted stretch of Interstate 40 in northern Arizona, somewhere between Flagstaff and Winslow, during the dead hours past midnight. It was November 2019, a night so cold the desert air stung through the vents of the cab even with the heater running full blast. I was hauling electronics eastbound, alone, fighting fatigue after 10 hours on the road. The sky was moonless, pitch black, the kind of darkness where the horizon disappears and everything outside the headlights looks like an empty void. My only company was the soft hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the CB radio, which had been mostly silent for the last 2 hours. Around 1:23 a.m., the CB let out a long, sharp burst of static. Not the usual interference. This one sounded like something dragging across the speaker. I turned the volume down, thinking maybe the wiring was loose. But then a voice slid through the static so suddenly that I jumped in my seat. It wasn't a normal CB voice. It wasn't a driver calling out to pass the time. It didn't even sound like a voice speaking into a microphone. It sounded like someone whispering directly into my ear. "Don't stop. He's behind your truck." I froze, gripping the wheel so tight my fingers went numb. The whisper was too clear, too close, as if someone sat in the passenger seat. I glanced at the empty chair, then at the mirror. Nothing but darkness behind me. My trailer stretched into the night, its lights glowing faintly, the desert stretching endlessly on both sides. I tried to convince myself it was a prank or interference. But something about the tone of that whisper felt wrong. It sounded urgent, strained, like someone who had been hiding for too long. I reached for the CB and answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Breaker. Who is this?" Silence. Only the faint hiss of static. I radioed again. "Come back. You said there's someone behind my truck." "Nothing." Just that quiet, thin hiss. The highway felt suddenly narrower, the darkness heavier. My mirrors reflected only blackness. My chest tightened as I pressed harder on the gas. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe fatigue was messing with me. But the whisper had been too clear, too human. 10 minutes later, the whisper came again. Don't stop. Don't look. This time it was softer, almost trembling. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned the volume down to 0, but even with the radio muted, the image of someone whispering from inside the speaker lingered in my mind. I kept driving, trying not to look at my mirrors. But the feeling that someone was watching me tightened like a knot in my gut. I passed a sign for a rest area 10 miles ahead. I planned to stop, clear my head, check the trailer. I told myself I didn't believe the voice. But when I saw the lights of the rest area glow faintly in the distance, the CB came alive again. No static. No distortion. Just that same shaky whisper. Don't go there. He follows the lights. I slammed the brakes without meaning to. The trailer rattled. My pulse hammered. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what any of it meant. But the fear in that whisper didn't sound fake. It sounded like someone warning me for the last time. I took the exit anyway. The ramp dipped into darkness. The rest area seemed half abandoned, with only one rusted light flickering near the dumpsters. I parked under it, thinking the brightness might help me feel normal. It didn't. The light cast long shadows that stretched across the pavement, twisting as the bulb flickered. I climbed out of the truck, my boots crunching the gravel. The desert air bit through my jacket. I walked slowly toward the back of the trailer. Everything felt too quiet. Even the wind had stopped. It was so silent I could hear my own breathing bouncing off the metal walls. When I reached the rear doors, something scraped the inside of the trailer. Just one long scrape, from top to bottom. I stepped back, heart racing, staring at the door. I waited for another sound. Nothing. I forced myself to open the latches and pull the doors wide. The trailer was empty. Perfectly empty. The walls were clean. Nothing was out of place. But on the inside of the right door, running vertically from top to bottom, was a fresh scratch. Long, deep. As if made by fingers dragging across the metal. I backed away slowly. My breath fogged the air. It felt colder than before. Much colder. As if something had sucked the warmth out of the night. I climbed back into the cab, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands shook as I tried to catch my breath. The CB, still muted, flickered with a faint light. Then, without touching the volume, the speaker buzzed. The whisper came again. He's under your truck now. I felt my blood turn to ice. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. I just stared at the windshield, afraid to look at the mirrors, afraid to look anywhere else. The cab felt suffocating, the cold creeping in from every corner. After a long minute, the whisper continued. He's searching for you. I turned the key and floored the accelerator. The truck roared forward, tires kicking gravel everywhere. I sped back onto the highway, pushed the truck as fast as I dared. I didn't look in the mirrors. I kept my eyes fixed on the road, the white lines blurring beneath me. I didn't stop until daylight broke across the desert. At the next fuel station, I forced myself to check the truck. No one was under it. But on the pavement where I had parked, there were tracks. Not boot prints. Not animal prints. Long, narrow marks, almost like someone dragging their feet as they crawled. I reported the CB interference to dispatch later that day. They said no one else was on that channel at that hour. They checked the logs. They checked the nearby units. No one had transmitted anything. 2 nights later, another trucker reported a strange whisper on his CB in the same area. He said the voice warned him not to stop. Dispatch called me and asked what exactly I had heard. I didn't tell them everything. I couldn't. But I asked the other driver one question. Did the voice sound scared? He went silent. Then he said quietly, "Yeah." Terrified. I never forgot the whisper. I switched trucks 3 months later and replaced my CB entirely. But sometimes, when I'm driving the late shift and the desert is too quiet, I feel that old fear crawl up my spine. And every so often, just on the edge of hearing, the CB crackles the same way it did that night. Like someone breathing too close to the speaker. Like someone trying to warn me again. I don't know who the voice belonged to. But I do know one thing. He wasn't warning me about himself. He was warning me about something else. Something that still follows the quiet stretches of I-40 after midnight. Something that scratches at trailers and crawls under trucks and waits for engines to go silent. Something that moves faster than the human I can see. And I pray I never stop on that highway again. The end. The child on the overpass. It happened in late October of 2020, on a fog-covered stretch of Interstate 90 in western South Dakota. The nights around that time were unusually cold, the kind that made your breath hang thick in the cab even with the heater on. I was hauling packaged food supplies eastbound from Rapid City toward Sioux Falls, working a long overnight shift that I had already stretched too far. It was around 3:10 a.m., the hour when the highway feels abandoned, when the fog swallows the world outside the headlights, and when every sound inside the cab feels louder than it should. I had been driving alone for the past 2 hours without seeing a single vehicle. The fog rolled low over the road, drifting like pale smoke. Even the radio had gone dead. The world had shrunk to the narrow tunnel illuminated by my headlights. My eyes burned from the strain, and I was already considering pulling over at the next rest area to splash some water on my face. But before I reached it, I saw something on the overpass ahead. At first it looked like a shadow. Just a darker shape standing motionless through the fog, so still that I thought it might be a road sign or a trick of the mist. But as I got closer, shape sharpened. It was a child. Thin. Small. Standing alone right at the center of the overpass railing. Not moving. Not waving. Just staring down at the highway below as if waiting for something. My stomach twisted instantly. A child shouldn't be out there. Not on a freezing night. Not miles away from any town or farmhouse. Instinct kicked in and I slowed the truck, my hazard lights blinking through the fog. The kid was wearing something light, maybe a hoodie, maybe a thin jacket. I couldn't tell. But whatever it wasn't enough for the cold. I leaned forward in my seat, trying to make out any detail. The fog swirled around the overpass, drifting past the child's legs, and for a moment, I thought maybe they were lost. Maybe they needed help. Maybe they'd wandered away from somewhere. But the nearer I got, the stranger it felt. The child didn't shift. Didn't look uncertain or confused. They stood too straight. Too still. As if they had been standing there for hours. When my headlights reached the underside of the overpass, I glanced up again. The child was gone. I blinked hard, thinking the fog had swallowed them. I slowed to almost a stop. I checked my mirrors, checked the shoulder, checked the railing above. Nothing. The entire overpass was empty. The road above was clear. No movement. No figure. Just fog and dead silence. A chill slid down my spine, but I forced myself to breathe. Maybe the kid had simply stepped back. Maybe they'd moved somewhere I couldn't see. Maybe my eyes were too tired. I rolled past the overpass, heart hammering, and kept telling myself it was nothing. Just exhaustion. Just fog playing tricks. Until I saw the second overpass 3 miles later. A sinking feeling gripped me as soon as it came into view. And then, as my headlights pierced the mist, there it was again. A child. Not the same size, not the same posture, this one leaned slightly forward, hands gripping the railing, staring at the highway beneath exactly as the first one had. My chest tightened. My palms grew damp on the wheel. I slowed. Looked up. And for a split second, so quick that I questioned whether it truly happened, the child tilted their head slightly, as if looking directly at me. A wave of dread washed over me. Something deep inside screamed that this wasn't normal. Children don't wander onto overpasses at 3 in the morning on isolated stretches of interstate. And they certainly don't appear multiple times miles apart. I passed under the bridge, heart pounding, and again checked my mirrors. The child was gone. That was when I decided to call state police. I pulled my CB toward me and told them exactly what I'd seen. The dispatcher asked for my location, then asked me to repeat the description of the child on the first overpass. When I finished, the dispatcher hesitated. "Sir," she said carefully, "I'm going to have to ask you for the mile markers." I told her the approximate range. Silence followed. "Are you certain it was a child?" "Yes," I said. "Twice." More silence. Finally she said, "We've checked the cameras on both overpasses. There's no one out there." Confusion and fear twisted together inside me. "But I saw." "I understand, sir. You're not the first to call." "Not the first." Her voice was tight, uneasy, as if she wanted to say more but wasn't allowed to. She told me a highway unit was already on patrol nearby and would drive through the area. I hung up, but something didn't feel right. I kept driving, gripping the wheel hard enough to whiten my knuckles. The fog thickened again, closing in so tightly that the beams of my headlights looked like solid walls of white. Only 10 minutes after that call, something flickered at the edge of my vision. Another overpass near Chamberlain Creek loomed ahead. My chest tightened. I slowed, dreading what I would see. And there, barely visible through the shifting fog, stood a child. This one smaller than the others. Maybe 6 or 7 years old. Standing near the left side of the railing. Their clothes looked darker, soaked through with mist. Their head hung slightly downward instead of staring ahead. Their posture seemed lifeless, almost limp. A cold shiver crawled up my spine. I stared, waiting for them to look at me. Hoping, in some strange way, that they wouldn't. They didn't move. Didn't raise their head. But as I passed directly underneath the bridge, my headlights caught something, a faint reflection in their eyes. Not like a normal reflection. It looked wrong. Too bright. Too focused. Too fixed in place. I drove on instinct, almost afraid to blink. When I checked the mirror once more, already knowing what I'd see, the overpass was empty again. No child. No movement. No trace. The fog swallowed everything behind me. By then, the fear was too strong to ignore. I couldn't explain what I'd seen, but I knew what I hadn't seen. There were no footprints on the overpasses. No vehicles. No shadows of anyone walking away. Nothing that suggested an actual child could have been there. And yet, 3 times, I had seen them clearly. I pulled off at the next lit truck stop, feeling the world tilt slightly as adrenaline drained from my limbs. I sat there for minutes, just breathing, staring at the empty road beyond the pumps. My phone buzzed. State police calling back. The officer asked if I was safe, then asked more precise questions: the height of the first child, the distance between the second, the posture of the third. When I described the last one, the small figure with the lowered head, the officer went quiet. After a long pause, he said, "You saw the youngest one." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean the youngest one?" He exhaled slowly. "We've had multiple reports for years. Always late at night. Always in heavy fog. Always on that 40-mile stretch. Witnesses describe 3 different children. 3 sizes. 3 postures." I felt a chill. "You're telling me people see them every year?" "Not every year," he said. "Only when the fog rises from the creek. The fog comes from the cold water meeting warm air. Causes mirages. That's the official explanation." "But you don't believe that," I whispered. He paused again. "No," he admitted. "Not after what we've recorded." Then he said something that made the hair on my neck rise. 2 months ago, a driver captured one of them on video. A child standing on the overpass. clear as day. But when he passed underneath, the child didn't disappear. It followed him. My breath caught. Followed? Yes, he said. It moved along the railing as he drove under it. The camera caught the shadow stretching across the concrete. But the strange part is that the child didn't walk. The shadow glided. A cold wave washed through me. Where's the video now? It was erased, the officer said quietly. Every file it was saved to corrupted. And the driver resigned from his company 2 weeks later. He refuses to discuss it. I leaned back in my seat, gripping the phone tighter. My mind replayed the 3 figures I had seen. The stillness. The disappearing. The wrong reflections in their eyes. Do you know who the children are? I asked. Another long pause. No, he said. But people talk. Some say years ago a family crashed near the creek during a fog storm. The parents survived. The kids didn't. They say the children try to follow headlights, thinking someone is finally coming back for them. I swallowed hard. The fog outside thickened again, drifting past the windows like pale fingers. Before hanging up, the officer gave me one last warning. If you see them again, don't stop. Don't look twice. Just keep driving until you're out of the fog. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I drove straight until dawn broke across the plains, turning the fog into thin wisps that vanished with the sunlight. But even now, years later, I still think about the 3 figures on the overpasses. The way they appeared in the fog. The way they vanished. The way their eyes seemed to reflect more than just light. I don't know what they were. But I know one thing for certain. They weren't lost. They were waiting. And they weren't waiting for me. They were waiting for someone who never came back. The end. The truck stop, room 17. It happened in early February of 2017 at a small, run-down truck stop motel off Highway 54, just outside Tucumcari, New Mexico. I had been hauling a mixed load from Phoenix toward Kansas City and had been driving nearly 14 hours through a cold front that brought sleet, freezing rain, and wind strong enough to push the trailer sideways. By the time I pulled into the truck stop around 11:40 p.m., the temperature had dropped below freezing, and a thin layer of ice glazed the parking lot. My windshield was fogged, my hands stiff from the cold, and my eyes burned from staying awake too long. I needed rest desperately, and the glowing red vacancy sign looked like the only option for miles. The place was old. The lobby lights flickered, and the front doors screeched when I pushed them open. A thin, older woman at the front desk looked up as I entered, her face pale, her movements slow. The heater in the lobby rattled as if struggling to stay alive. I asked for a room. She hesitated just a little too long. "We've only got one left," she said quietly. "Room 17. Something in her voice felt strange, but exhaustion pushed the concern out of my mind. I paid, took the key, and walked across the icy lot toward a row of dimly lit doors. Room 17 was at the far end, half shaded by a broken floodlight that buzzed and sputtered. The room number was chipped, the paint peeling. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The moment I entered, the air felt wrong. Not cold, heavy. Stale. Like no one had opened a window in years. The room smelled faintly of old cologne, disinfectant, and something metallic. The bed was made neatly, but the blankets looked untouched for a long time. The lamp in the corner flickered when I turned it on. Shadows clung to the corners of the room even with the lights on, as if the darkness didn't want to leave. Still, I was too tired to care. I locked the door, dropped my bag by the wall, and sat on the bed, stretching out my legs. The springs groaned under my weight. For a few minutes, nothing happened. The silence felt thick and unnatural, but I forced my eyes shut, telling myself I only needed a couple of hours of sleep. Sometime around 12:30 a.m., I woke to a sound. Footsteps. Slow, steady footsteps moving across the room. My eyes snapped open. The room was pitch dark. The lamp had turned itself off. For a few seconds, I lay frozen, listening. The footsteps were faint, not loud enough to be someone walking normally, but clear enough to tell they were inside the room. My breath hitched. My pulse hammered. I forced myself to sit up slowly, feeling around for the lamp switch. When the light flicked on, the room was empty. The footsteps stopped instantly. I tried telling myself it had been a dream or maybe pipes in the walls, but the sound had been too close. Too measured. I got up, checked the bathroom, checked under the bed. Nothing. Everything was exactly as it was when I arrived. I climbed back into bed, turned off the lamp, and tried again to sleep. At 1:07 a.m., I woke again. This time to breathing. Soft, uneven breathing just inches from my ear. I froze. I didn't move. Didn't blink. The room was dark again, though I hadn't turned the lamp off. I felt the cold air on the side of my neck as the breathing continued, slow, ragged, as if someone were struggling for air. I reached out blindly for the lamp and flicked it on. No one. The room was empty. But the air around me was ice cold, far colder than before. My breath came out in a pale cloud, something that should not have been possible indoors with the heater on. I stood up and backed into the far corner, staring at the bed as if expecting someone to materialize from the shadows. The breathing had stopped, but the cold clung to the room like frost. I checked the heater, still running. Checked the windows, shut tight. Checked the door, locked. When I tried to calm myself, another sound drifted across the room. A whisper. Not words. Just the shape of a voice. A low, broken exhale that seemed to come from the foot of the bed. My skin crawled. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I grabbed my jacket, ready to leave the room entirely, when the lamp flickered violently and shut off again. The darkness was instant, total, suffocating. And in that darkness, I heard footsteps moving toward me. Slow. Dragging. Uneven. I fumbled for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and the beam cut through the darkness. There was no one on the floor. No one near the bed. But in the beam of the flashlight, something caught my attention, a shape on the wall above the chair. A dark mark. I approached it slowly. It was a handprint. Not dusty. Not faint. Fresh. As if someone with a wet, cold hand had pressed their palm against the wall. My breath shook. I backed away, fumbling for the doorknob, ready to bolt out of the room. But when I pulled the door open, the hallway felt even colder than the room. The air felt wrong, too dense, too silent. I almost stepped out, but a noise behind me made me turn. The closet door creaked open an inch. I stared at it, flashlight trembling in my hand. The door wasn't open when I checked earlier. I approached cautiously, every part of me screaming to turn around and run. But something about the door held my attention. Inside the closet, at the very back, something was on the floor. A wallet. An old leather wallet, cracked and darkened by time. Against my better judgment, I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a driver's license belonging to a man named Michael Hardison, from Oklahoma City. The photo was worn, edges bent. There were also hotel receipts, several of them, from the same truck stop motel. Each receipt listed room 17. The most recent was dated 8 months earlier. As I stared at the receipts, another sound stirred behind me. Footsteps. Coming from inside the bathroom this time. Slow. Heavy. Closer. I dropped the wallet and ran. I didn't stop running until I reached the lobby. The front desk woman was still there, though her face looked paler than before. When she saw me standing there, shaking, she didn't ask what happened. She didn't even look surprised. "You stayed in room 17, she said quietly. I nodded, still catching my breath. Her eyes dropped to the floor as she spoke. "It should have been locked. I thought I had it sealed off. The owner won't let me close it officially, but no one is supposed to be in that room anymore." "Why?" I demanded. "What happened in there?" She hesitated, but the defeat in her face told me she had been carrying the story for too long. Last year, a truck driver stayed in that room, she whispered. He had chest pains in the night. Tried to call for help but couldn't reach the phone. He died alone on the floor. They didn't find him until the next afternoon. My stomach twisted. She continued, voice trembling. People who stay in that room hear him. Walking. Breathing. Trying to get to the door. Some say he tries to wake them, thinking there's someone who can help him. I stared at her, remembering the breathing at my ear, the footsteps crossing the room, the handprint on the wall. He died trying to get out, she whispered. And he never did. She refunded my money, told me I could sleep in my truck if I felt safer. I didn't sleep at all. I sat in the driver's seat until dawn, staring at the motel door to room 17. And as the sun rose, warming the icy lot, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The curtains in room 17 moved. Not from wind. From inside. Slowly. As if someone was standing there, watching me leave. I started the engine and drove away without looking back. But I kept thinking about the wallet. The receipts. The breathing. The way the footsteps had moved across the floor like someone still searching for help he never got in time. And I knew without a doubt that room 17 wasn't empty. It never would be. The end. Terrifying true stories from abandoned places. It happened in late March of 2016 on a forgotten stretch of Highway 93 in Nevada, somewhere between Ely and Pioche. The desert nights there are brutally cold, and the wind carries fine sand that whispers against the truck's windows like fingernails scraping glass. I had been hauling a load from Reno to Albuquerque, running a few hours behind schedule after a mechanical issue earlier in the day. By the time I reached that isolated part of the highway, it was already past 2 a.m., and I hadn't seen another vehicle for nearly 40 minutes. The road was pitch black, the sky moonless, and the only sounds were the rumble of the engine and the steady blast of the heater trying to fight the desert chill. Around mile marker 184, I saw the faint outline of an old abandoned gas station at the edge of the desert, a place I had passed during the day once before but never at night. It sat half collapsed, with broken windows and rusted signs that creaked softly in the wind. The place looked dead, swallowed by sand and time. Normally I wouldn't have stopped, but my low fuel light blinked to life, and I decided to pull over for a moment to check my reserve and plan my next stop. I pulled into the gravel lot, which crunched under the tires like brittle bones. When I stepped out of the cab, the night air hit me with a biting cold so sharp it felt like needles against my skin. The wind died completely the moment I closed the truck door behind me, leaving an unnatural, suffocating silence. I clicked on my flashlight and walked around the truck, checking the fuel gauge manually. I figured I had enough to make the next station 50 miles ahead. Just as I was about to climb back into the cab, I noticed something strange. A faint, warm light flickered inside the abandoned gas station. At first I thought it was a reflection, maybe even the moon, until I remembered the sky was completely dark. The light pulsed, like a lantern swaying slightly. I stood frozen, staring at the broken window. The building had been abandoned for decades. No power. No people. Nothing. But the light was unmistakable. Curiosity pulled me toward it, though every instinct screamed to get back in the truck and drive. I stepped slowly toward the building, boots crunching against the loose gravel, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. As I reached the entrance, the warm glow inside faded suddenly, leaving only the cold darkness. I hesitated, then shone my flashlight through the shattered doorframe. Dust covered the floor, thick and undisturbed. Old shelves lay collapsed, covered in rusted cans and debris. Nothing moved. I exhaled slowly, convincing myself it had been my own imagination or a trick of the light. I turned to leave. That was when I saw footprints. Fresh footprints. Tiny, like a child's, leading deeper into the building. My mouth went dry. I stepped backward, my flashlight shaking slightly in my hand. The prints were small barefoot impressions in the dust, the edges crisp and clear, as if they had been made seconds ago. They led from the doorway toward the back room. I should have left right then. But something kept me rooted in place, the idea that maybe someone was inside, maybe in trouble. A kid alone in the desert wasn't something I could ignore. So I forced myself to step inside. The air inside the gas station was colder than outside, freezing enough that my breath turned white. Dust floated in the flashlight beam like tiny shimmering particles. I followed the footprints toward the back room. When I reached the doorway, I stopped. The room was empty. No furniture. No shelves. No place for anyone to hide. The footprints continued into the center of the room, then stopped abruptly, as if the person had simply vanished. The silence pressed against me so hard my ears rang. I scanned the room again, the beam of my flashlight trembling. Nothing. No movement. No sound. And then the temperature dropped sharply. In seconds, the cold became unbearable. My breath turned thick, fogging the air in front of me. My fingertips numbed. I backed away slowly, sensing something I couldn't explain, like a presence watching from the dark corners. Without warning, something slammed into the back wall. A loud, violent thud echoed through the entire building, shaking dust from the ceiling. I spun around, heart pounding, flashlight pointing at the wall. Nothing had fallen. Nothing had moved. But the impact was too heavy to ignore. It sounded like a body hitting the wall at full force. My instincts finally kicked in. I turned to leave. But as I stepped back into the main room, the warm glow returned. Right behind me. I felt the heat against my back before I saw it. I turned slowly. The light hovered in the air, near the doorway to the back room, an orb of orange gold like a lantern flame suspended in place. But there was no lantern. No object. No source. Just the light. It pulsed once. Twice. Then dimmed slightly. And on the far wall, illuminated by the glow, I saw a shadow. Not mine. A child-sized silhouette stood facing me. Small shoulders. Thin arms. Head tilted slightly down as if watching the floor. The light flickered, and the shadow twitched. Not by the movement of light, by its own movement. It shifted 1 foot slowly forward. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. The shadow moved again. But there was no figure casting it. No child. Only the shadow. I bolted toward the entrance, heart slamming against my ribs. But before I reached the broken doorway, the air shifted behind me. A soft sound brushed past my ear. A breath. A faint exhale, too close, too real. I lunged out of the building and sprinted toward my truck, slipping on gravel as I yanked the door open and climbed inside. My hands shook as I slammed the lock shut. My breath fogged the windshield despite the heater blasting hot air. I started the engine, floored the accelerator, and tore out of the lot. The truck roared down the empty highway, and I didn't look back, not until I was miles away. When I finally glanced into my mirror, my stomach dropped. The gas station wasn't dark. It glowed with that same warm light. But there was something else, something standing in the doorway. A small silhouette. Unmoving. Watching. I didn't slow down. I drove until I saw the first real gas station in Pioche. I parked under the bright fluorescent lights and forced myself to breathe normally. My hands were still shaking. The next morning, after the sun had risen, I mentioned the abandoned station to a local mechanic while he checked my truck. His face changed instantly. "You stopped there?" he asked, voice low. I nodded. He exhaled sharply. "A kid died there in the 90s. Got trapped inside during a fire. The place has been abandoned ever since." He paused, hesitating. "Truckers say they see lights at night. Footprints. Shadows. Things that don't belong there." I didn't reply. I didn't need him to tell me more. I knew what I had seen. I knew what had followed me to the doorway. And I knew I would never stop near that place again. But even now, sometimes on long desert drives, when the night gets too quiet and the road too empty, I think about the warm glow behind me, the shadow without a body, the breath against my ear. And I wonder if the child inside that gas station is still waiting. Or if he followed me farther than I realized. The end. Real emergency calls that still haunt dispatchers. It happened in early December of 2014 on a lonely stretch of Interstate 25 in northern New Mexico, between Wagon Mountain and Springer. That night the desert air was so cold it made the steel of the trailer ring with every bump in the road. A winter storm had passed through earlier, leaving thin patches of snow scattered across the asphalt and a pale mist drifting low along the shoulders. I had been hauling building materials from Santa Fe toward Denver, driving the graveyard shift alone. It was about 1:15 a.m. when I crossed into the emptiest stretch of highway, no lights, no towns, nothing but open land and darkness so heavy it swallowed the world outside my headlights. The only sound in the cab was the hum of the engine and the occasional rattle of tools in the compartment behind my seat. I kept scanning the mirrors out of habit, but the road behind me stayed perfectly black, without even the faint glow of distant headlights. It felt like the world had emptied itself and left only me moving through it. Around mile marker 412, my CB radio let out a soft crackle. Not unusual in the mountains, but the static had a strange rhythm to it, almost like someone breathing on the other end. I reached over and lowered the volume, assuming it was interference from the weather. Then my phone rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The ringtone cut sharply through the silence, vibrating against the cup holder. The caller ID showed unknown, but that wasn't rare on the road. Maybe dispatch needed something. Maybe my company was checking on delays from the storm. I answered. At first, all I heard was wind. Then a shaky voice, young, male, trembling. Hello? Can you hear me? I frowned. This is a private number. Who am I speaking to? I need help, the voice said. I'm stuck. I think I'm stuck in a ditch. I can't move. My blood chilled. Where are you? A long silence. Then the voice broke slightly. I don't know. I checked my mirrors again, nothing but darkness. Are you hurt? Another pause. Then a soft, panicked whisper. I think so. I pulled onto the shoulder and turned on my hazards, heart pounding. I switched to speakerphone and grabbed the steering wheel with both hands. Listen, I said, tell me what you see around you. Anything. Trees, lights, signs, anything. I can't see anything, he whispered. It's dark. It's too dark. The dread inside me tightened. Do you see your vehicle? Are you inside it? No, the voice said. I was thrown out. I think the truck rolled. I swallowed hard. Your truck? You're a driver? A shaky breath filled the line. Yeah. I was heading north. I hit something. I didn't see it. The hairs on my arms stood on end. A crash on I-25 with no witnesses wasn't impossible. Parts of it were so empty that an accident could go unnoticed for hours. I'm going to get help, I told him. Stay on the line. No, he whispered suddenly. Don't hang up. Something's here. My stomach dropped. What do you mean something's there? I heard footsteps, he whispered. I can't see who it is. They're walking around the wreck. A cold wave washed over me. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. Is it a person? Maybe someone stopped to help. No, he said, voice trembling. They're not talking. They're just circling. I gripped the wheel tighter. Can you describe them? I can't see them, he whispered. They keep moving. They're dragging something. Something heavy. Like metal. I took a deep breath to steady myself. Okay. I'm calling emergency services. Stay with me. I used my other phone to dial 911. The dispatcher answered immediately. State emergency. What's your location? I'm on northbound I-25 by mile marker 412, I said. I got a call from someone who says he's a truck driver. Says he crashed and needs help. The dispatcher's tone sharpened. Name? He didn't give one. What number did he call from? Unknown, I said. He put me on speaker, she said sharply. I switched. This is New Mexico Highway Emergency Services, the dispatcher said. Can you hear me? The young man's breathing filled the line. Yes. Stay calm, she said. We have units near Springer. We need your location. Look for lights, road shapes, stars, anything. I can't, he said. It's so dark. I can't see. A horrible scraping sound echoed through my cab, a long, metallic drag that made every muscle in my body tense. It wasn't from my truck. It was coming through the phone. The dispatcher heard it too. What was that? They're right next to me, the driver whispered. I can hear them breathing. The dispatcher's voice dropped to a controlled whisper. Do not move. Do you understand? Stay exactly where you are. Another scrape echoed through the phone, closer this time. Then a soft thud, like a boot hitting metal. The driver whimpered. Please don't leave me. I'm here, I said quickly. We're both here. Then everything went silent. No wind. No breathing. Nothing. Hello? I said. Are you still there? Silence. The dispatcher typed rapidly on her end. Sir, stay on the line. Units are being rerouted. Suddenly, the driver exhaled sharply, as if gasping for air. It's behind me. My pulse spiked. What's behind you? I don't know, he whispered. It's touching my shoulder. I felt my chest tighten with a cold panic I hadn't felt in years. Listen to me. Don't turn around. Just stay absolutely still. I'm scared, he whispered. I know, I said. Help is coming. Then, for the first time, we heard something else through the phone. A deep, slow breath that was not the boy's. It was too loud. Too close. Too heavy. The dispatcher's voice sharpened. Sir, if you can move, get to an open space. I can't, he whimpered. Something's holding my leg. And then, another sound. A wet dragging noise. Not metal. Flesh. Something alive scraping across the dirt. My throat tightened. What's happening? He didn't answer. But we heard him breathing fast and shallow. Then a faint cry, like he was trying not to scream. The dispatcher spoke quickly. Sir, listen to me. You need to. A sudden burst of static cut through the line, followed by a muffled impact, as if the phone hit the ground. The young man's voice cried out, short, sharp, terrified. Then nothing. Silence swallowed the call. Sir, the dispatcher shouted. Sir, respond. The silence continued for nearly 20 seconds. Then, slowly, the phone picked up one more sound. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Rhythmic. Getting closer to the phone. The dispatcher whispered into her mic, all units, code 3, full emergency response, possible trapped motorist, mile marker 412, triangulate signal, now. The footsteps continued, each one making my blood run colder. The sound grew louder, as if whatever was walking was passing directly over the phone. Then, breathing. Low. Wet. Guttural. We both heard it. One long exhale, right into the microphone. The line cut immediately after. I sat there frozen, gripping the wheel, listening to my hazards clicking in the cold silence. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me, though neither of us spoke for a full minute. Finally she said quietly, we're sending a team. Stay where you are. It took 25 minutes for the nearest patrol car to reach the area. The officer checked the ditch, the ravine, the shoulders, the entire stretch of road. Nothing. No skid marks. No broken glass. No vehicle. No footprints. No blood. No sign of anyone at all. The dispatcher called me again an hour later. The call was not traceable, she said. The number doesn't exist in our system. There is no record of a crash tonight. I asked her what she thought happened. She exhaled shakily. This isn't the first time we've gotten a call like that. My hands went cold. We've had 3 similar calls over the last decade, she said. Always from that stretch. Always late at night. Always a young male voice claiming he crashed. I whispered, do any of them get found? No, she said quietly. None. The next morning I drove past the same stretch in daylight. The desert looked empty. Peaceful. Harmless. But every time I think about that night, I remember the sound of the heavy breathing on the phone. The scraping in the dirt. The footsteps approaching the device. The young man's last terrified breath. Somewhere out on that lonely highway, something happened. And whatever it was not human. The end. The screaming from the empty trailer. It happened in late November of 2018 on a dark stretch of Interstate 55 in rural Arkansas, between Osceola and Torrell. The sky that night was overcast, heavy with low gray clouds that hid the moon completely. I had been hauling an empty refrigerated trailer from Memphis back towards St. Louis after a delivery ran shorter than expected. It was close to 2:30 a.m., the time when the fields along the highway turn pitch black and the air grows unnaturally still. I had been driving alone for hours, and the road behind me was empty, no headlights, no taillights, no sign of life except the rhythmic hum of my tires cutting through the cold, damp air. The temperature hovered just above freezing. A thin mist clung to the highway, swirling around the edges of my headlights. The trailer rattled softly behind me, normal for a reefer unit when empty. I was listening to quiet static on the CB, more out of habit than need. Most drivers were asleep or stopped for the night. The silence in the cab was thick, heavy, the kind that makes you feel like you're the last person awake in the world. Around mile marker 23, I heard it for the first time. A loud, sharp scream from inside my empty trailer. I jerked upright, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it or that something mechanical had slammed loose. But the sound had been unmistakable, raw, human, terrified. A single scream, drawn out and violent, muffled only slightly by the insulated walls of the trailer. I pulled my foot off the accelerator, heart pounding. What the hell was that? I muttered, checking the mirrors. The trailer looked normal. Nothing swayed. No doors flapping. No shadows moving inside. I turned down the CB, listening. Nothing. I slowed the truck to 45, trying to make sense of it. Maybe a stray animal had gotten in. Maybe the trailer wasn't as empty as I thought. Maybe there was some weird mechanical echo. Anything was better than considering the possibility that someone was actually inside. Then the scream came again. Longer this time. More desperate. I hit the hazards and pulled onto the shoulder, dust kicking up behind me as the truck rumbled to a stop. The scream faded into silence, leaving only the faint hiss of the wind brushing past the trailer. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I didn't want to open the doors, but I had to. If someone was trapped inside, I couldn't leave them there. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out of the cab. The cold hit me instantly. The highway was empty in both directions, nothing but darkness and the whisper of grass bending in the wind. The reefer unit hummed, vibrating lightly against the metal frame. I approached the back of the trailer slowly, each step crunching against the gritty shoulder. My breath came out in faint clouds. The closer I got, the heavier the air felt, like the atmosphere thickened around the trailer. I placed a hand on the cold metal door. Silence. Then, 3 heavy bangs from inside. I jumped back, nearly dropping the flashlight. The bangs were powerful enough to rattle the doors, as if someone inside was pounding with both fists. "Hey!" I shouted instinctively. "Are you okay?" "I'm opening the door." The pounding stopped instantly. I swallowed hard, grabbed the handle, and unlatched the doors. The metal groaned as I pulled them open. My flashlight beam shot into the darkness. The trailer was empty. Completely empty. The walls were bare. The floor was clean. Nothing moved. I climbed inside, sweeping the light along every inch of the space. My boots echoed sharply against the hollow metal floor. The reefer unit hummed overhead, steady and unbroken. No signs of animals. No debris. Nothing that could explain the screams or the pounding. But as I reached the center of the trailer, the temperature plummeted. My breath turned thick and white. The cold was sudden, unnatural. My flashlight flickered. I turned back toward the doors, suddenly desperate to get outside. That was when I heard a whisper. It came from the very front of the trailer. A soft, broken exhale. Followed by a faint, trembling voice. "Please, let me out." I froze where I stood. The beam of my flashlight trembled. "Who's there?" I called out. "Show yourself." Silence. Then, louder. "Let me out." My heart pounded against my ribs. "You're already out," I said, voice shaking. I opened the doors. The voice didn't answer. Instead, a slow scraping sound echoed from the ceiling, like fingernails dragging across metal. The scraping moved steadily from the front of the trailer toward me. The air grew colder with each passing second. I bolted for the doors, nearly slipping as I jumped out onto the gravel. I slammed the doors shut, latching them with shaking hands. The banging started again, violent, furious, echoing through the metal. I ran back to the cab, climbed inside, locked the doors, and floored the accelerator. The truck roared forward, tires screeching against the pavement. I didn't look back. But the banging continued. I could hear it even with the engine roaring, loud enough to vibrate through the frame. I kept driving, speeding far over what was reasonable for the icy night. My chest tightened with every impact against the trailer. Then, as I crossed the bridge near Torrell, the banging stopped. Silence filled the cab. Heavy, unnatural silence. Suddenly, the CB radio crackled, loud, sharp, startling. A voice slid through the speakers. A whisper. "Why didn't you help me?" My skin crawled. My breath caught. The voice wasn't angry, it was defeated. Pained. Broken in a way that made my stomach twist. Then the line went dead. I drove straight into the nearest open truck stop without stopping, shaking as I parked under the bright fluorescent lights. I grabbed a security guard and demanded he help me open my trailer. We opened the doors together. Nothing. Just an empty, cold metal box. But on the floor, near the very front of the trailer, the guard pointed to something I hadn't seen before. Scratch marks. Long, thin, desperate lines etched into the metal floor. As if someone had clawed at it for hours. The guard looked at me slowly. "You haul grief freight before? Coroner transfers? Anything like that?" I swallowed hard. "No." He hesitated. "This trailer ever carry a body?" I shook my head. But when I called my company the next morning to ask who had last used the trailer I was assigned, the dispatcher went silent. Finally she said, "That unit was with coroner transport 3 months ago. Driver didn't finish the job. Had a fatal heart attack parked on the side of the road." I asked what happened to the body. Another long silence. "They found it inside the trailer. Whoever they transported had been trying to claw their way out." My blood ran cold. I hung up, staring at the empty trailer in front of me, remembering the voice, the banging, the cold scraping across the ceiling. I never requested another reefer unit again. But on certain nights, when I'm driving alone through the empty stretches of the interstate, I sometimes hear a faint echo behind me. A scream. A whisper. A desperate plea that never stops repeating itself inside the metal walls of my mind. "Let me out." The end. The man running beside the truck. It happened in early August of 2021 on a remote, dimly lit stretch of Highway 287 in northern Texas, between Childress and Quanah. The heat from the day had finally dropped, leaving the night air thick, dry, and strangely still. I had been hauling a load of auto parts from Amarillo toward Dallas, driving the late shift alone. It was around 1:50 a.m., and the highway ahead was empty, no headlights, no taillights, no ranch houses, no gas stations. Just a long black road cutting through endless open fields. The sky was overcast, the moon hidden behind heavy clouds. The darkness was so complete it felt alive, pressing in against the edges of my headlights. Even the wind had died. The world felt paused, suspended in a kind of eerie hush I couldn't shake off. The first sign that something was wrong came from the side mirror. I glanced at it out of habit, expecting to see nothing but black. Instead, I saw movement, fast movement, keeping pace with the truck. At first I thought it was a trick of the eyes. Maybe one of those hallucinations that show up after too many hours on the road. I blinked, looked again. There it was. A figure. Running beside the truck. I jerked upright, gripping the wheel tightly. The figure was a blur at first, hard to distinguish in the dark. But as my eyes adjusted, the shape sharpened. A tall, gaunt man running full speed right along the passenger side, only inches away from the trailer tires. His head was down. His posture unnatural, almost animalistic. His arms swung sharply in long, unnatural arcs. But the most terrifying part was his speed. I was doing nearly 65 miles an hour. And he was keeping up. My heart hammered. My breath caught. I flicked the headlights brighter and pressed the accelerator to see if I could lose him. The speed climbed, 68, 70, 72. The tires hummed louder against the asphalt. But the man matched every increase. He didn't fall behind. He didn't struggle. He ran with a terrifying, effortless speed. I stared, trying to convince myself this couldn't be real. No human could run like that. Maybe it was an animal. A coyote? A deer? But no animal ran upright like that, with long arms and a humanoid outline. Just as I leaned forward to get a closer look, the figure turned its head. Its eyes were completely black. No whites. No shine. No reflection. Just two deep voids staring directly into the cab. A cold burst of fear shot through me so violently that for a moment I felt dizzy. I slammed the accelerator. The truck roared past 75 miles per hour. The trailer groaned behind me, swaying slightly. I kept stealing glances at the mirror. He was still there. Running. Watching. Keeping perfect pace. My throat tightened. Every instinct screamed to get away, but the road ahead was a long empty stretch with no exits, no towns, no rest stops for another 20 miles. There was nowhere to go. Then the figure moved closer. Not gradually, instantly. One moment he was 2 feet from the trailer tires. The next, he was directly outside the passenger window. Running beside the cab. I gasped, swerving slightly out of pure shock. My headlights illuminated his form for a split second, tall, thin, wearing clothing that looked shredded by wind or time. His face was pale, stretched too tightly over sharp bones. His mouth hung slightly open, as if breathing too calmly for someone running at highway speed. Those black eyes stayed fixed on me. I forced myself to look forward and keep the wheel steady. The truck veered dangerously close to the shoulder before I corrected it. Sweat dripped into my eyes. My hands trembled violently. I could feel my pulse thundering in my neck. After a few seconds that felt like hours, the figure disappeared from the window. I didn't see him fall back. Didn't see him slow. He just vanished, from one moment to the next. I checked my mirrors again. Nothing but darkness. For a moment, I let myself breathe. Until something slammed against the back of the cab. The impact shook the entire truck. I jolted forward, gripping the wheel, hard in my throat. The sound was so loud it echoed through the metal frame, like a body hitting the rear wall behind my seat. I whipped around, staring at the sleeper compartment. It was empty. Silent. But the metal wall behind the seats had a faint vibration, pulsing like something was pressed against the other side. I turned back to the road, panicked, trying to stay in my lane. The steering wheel felt slippery in my hands. I kept searching the mirrors, expecting to see that figure running behind the truck now. But the darkness remained empty. I pushed the truck to 80 miles per hour, faster than I had any business going with a full trailer. The engine roared. My chest tightened from adrenaline. 5 minutes passed with no sound, no movement. Then the CB radio crackled. A voice came through. Low. Broken. Distorted. You can't outrun him. I nearly swerved off the road. My breath caught. The voice wasn't a trucker's voice. It didn't sound natural. It was too slow, too hollow, as if someone were speaking from deep underground. The radio went silent again as abruptly as it had spoken. The air in the cab felt cold, unnaturally cold. My breath turned faintly white. I wiped sweat from my face, unsure why the temperature had dropped so suddenly. Just as I tried to steady my breathing, the entire truck shuddered. Something crawled along the roof. The footsteps were soft but fast, skittering, scraping, moving from the front of the cab toward the trailer with an inhuman pattern. I stared helplessly upward, every muscle in my body tensing. The footsteps moved toward the sleeper compartment. Then stopped directly above me. The roof sagged slightly, just enough to make the metal creak. I held my breath for nearly a minute, waiting for whatever was up there to move again. But the silence stretched on endlessly. Finally, I forced myself to speak. Get off my truck, I whispered to no one. The roof creaked softly in response. Then the footsteps retreated toward the back, faster, lighter, almost playful. And then they vanished completely. I didn't slow down until I reached the outskirts of Quanah. The first streetlight felt like stepping into reality again. I pulled into a 24-hour gas station and parked under the brightest canopy I could find. My hands shook violently as I climbed out of the cab. I circled the truck with my flashlight. And that was when I saw them. Footprints on the side of the trailer. Not shoe prints. Bare footprints. Long, narrow, human-shaped, but distorted, like the toes were too long, the arch too high. They formed a trail across the sidewall, leading from the rear bumper up toward the roof. My stomach twisted as I followed the trail with the beam of the flashlight. The last print was smeared slightly, as if something had leapt off the roof mid-stride. I called a mechanic the next morning to check for damage. When he saw the footprints, he froze. You see a guy out there? He asked quietly. I shook my head. He exhaled slowly. Drivers talk about something like this. Something that follows trucks in the dark out here. Something that runs faster than anything should. I didn't respond. He lowered his voice. They say if you see it once, you'll see it again. I sold that truck 6 months later. But even today, when I drive through the emptiest stretches of highway at night, I sometimes catch a flicker of movement in the mirror. A black shape. Running. Keeping pace. Watching with those empty, depthless eyes. True missing person stories that took a dark turn. It happened in early September of 2015 on a desolate stretch of Highway 50 in central Nevada, a place locals called the loneliest road in America. The desert at night there is pitch black, no towns, no streetlights, no houses, not even the passing glimmer of another vehicle for miles. I had been hauling a partial load of office supplies from Fallon toward Ely, trying to make up time after a late start. It was around 1:40 a.m. when I crossed into the emptiest part of the highway, where the land flattened out into endless darkness and the sky looked like a black ocean swallowing everything beneath it. The night air was dry and cold, colder than it should have been for September. Dust from the desert drifted across the asphalt in thin waves, flashing silver in my headlights. The CB was dead. The radio stations had long faded into static. It felt like I had slipped out of the world and was driving across some abandoned place that wasn't meant for people anymore. I didn't know I was about to answer a missing persons call that no one had made. Around mile marker 208, something flashed on the right shoulder. At first I thought it was a coyote or loose tarp thrown from a passing pickup earlier in the day. But as I slowed slightly, the shape grew clearer. A person stood on the shoulder, facing the desert, not the road. A woman. Her clothes were light-colored, maybe a faded sweatshirt and jeans, but they were dusty and stiff, like she had been out there for hours. Her hair moved gently with the wind, but she didn't react to the sound of the truck approaching. I eased off the accelerator, slowing enough to get a better look. The woman didn't turn. She didn't move. She stood as still as a statue, facing the empty expanse of desert. My pulse quickened. People don't just stand on the edge of Highway 50 at 2 in the morning. Not unless something is very wrong. I pulled onto the shoulder about 20 yards ahead of her and flipped on my hazards. The desert fell completely silent except for the ticking of the cooling engine. I stepped out of the cab, flashlight in hand, and walked slowly toward her. "Ma'am?" I called out. "Are you all right? Do you need help?" No answer. My boots crunched softly against the gravel. The beam of my flashlight shook slightly in my hand. The woman didn't flinch when I got closer, didn't turn, didn't acknowledge me. Her arms hung stiffly at her sides. When I got close enough to see the side of her face, my stomach twisted. Her skin was pale, too pale, like someone drained of all warmth. Her lips were slightly parted, and her eyes were wide open, glassy, unfocused, staring into the absolute darkness ahead. "Ma'am," I said quietly, "can you hear me?" Still nothing. Something felt wrong. Deeply wrong. I stepped closer, slowly raising the flashlight. And that was when I saw her feet. Bare. Cut and raw. Covered in dust and dried blood. She had walked far, too far. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. "Let me help you," I said gently. "There's a truck stop not far." The woman inhaled sharply. Not a normal breath, more like a gasp, a sudden intake of air as if she had forgotten how to breathe at all. Then she spoke, her voice breaking like dry paper. "They left me." A cold chill slid down my spine. "Who left you?" She didn't answer. Her mouth shut abruptly, her jaw tightening. Her gaze stayed locked on the desert. Before I could say anything else, a sound drifted across the dark. Footsteps. Behind me. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. My heart froze. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the empty shoulder, across the asphalt, into the desert brush. No one was there. But the footsteps continued. Moving across the gravel. Coming closer. I backed away from the road, scanning frantically for a figure, a shadow, anything. The footsteps were unmistakable, crunching gravel, shifting sand, steady, rhythmic. But the desert was empty. I turned back to the woman. She was gone. Vanished. Not walking away. Not running. Gone. The dirt where she had stood was undisturbed, no footprints leading away, no sign of movement. My breath caught. I stumbled backward, staring at the empty shoulder, feeling a suffocating cold settle into the air around me. The footsteps behind me stopped. Silence swallowed the desert. A wave of dread rolled through my chest, and every instinct screamed at me to get back in the truck. I rushed toward the cab, climbing in so fast I nearly slipped on the step. I slammed the door, locked it, and started the engine with trembling hands. I checked the mirrors. Nothing. Just blackness stretching endlessly in every direction. I pulled back onto the highway and sped up, not caring about the speed limit. My heart thudded in my throat. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text message. From an unknown number. One word. Help. My hands shook violently. I forced myself to breathe, telling myself it had to be a mistake or a wrong number. Then another message came through. They left me here. My skin crawled. I stared at the screen, dread pooling in my stomach. Another message arrived, slower this time, as if typed by unsteady fingers. I'm still on the road. A cold shiver ran through me. I scanned both sides of the highway through the windows. There was no one there. No woman. No footprints. Nothing but darkness. Then my phone lit up again. This time, it was an image. I hesitated, then opened it. The photo was dark, grainy. Taken from ground level. I could barely make out the outline of tire tracks illuminated by faint light. My tire tracks. The ones I had left when pulling over moments earlier. And in the corner of the photo, partly obscured by the darkness, was a shape. A silhouette. A woman. Standing right where she had been. Watching my truck drive away. My breath caught in my throat. The road ahead blurred slightly as I struggled to stay focused. The phone buzzed again. Another text. Turn around. I didn't respond. Another message. You left me too. A cold sweat broke across my skin. I tightened my grip on the wheel. I didn't leave you, I said aloud, though no one could hear. You weren't there anymore. Another text came instantly, as if she had heard. I was. I pressed harder on the accelerator. The phone rang. The same unknown number. I didn't answer. It rang again. And again. Finally, the ringing stopped. I exhaled shakily until the voicemail alert chimed. My throat tightened. Against my better judgment, I pressed play. At first, only wind whispered through the speaker. Then, faintly, a voice. The woman's voice. Help me. Another breath. Closer this time. You saw me. Then the voice shifted, becoming deeper, distorted, wrong. You should have stayed. The voicemail cut off. I drove until the first glow of dawn broke over the desert horizon, and I didn't stop until I reached Ely. My hands shook so badly I could barely sign the delivery papers. Later that morning, curiosity or fear, maybe both, made me search local news on my phone. That was when I found it. 3 years earlier, a woman had gone missing on Highway 50, last seen near mile marker 208. Her car had been found abandoned. Her footprints had trailed into the desert. She was never found. The article included a photo of her. Same hair. Same clothes. Same face. The same woman I had spoken to. The same woman I had spoken to. The same woman who vanished into thin air. And the same woman who had texted me afterward. Even now, when I drive lonely highways at night, I shut off my phone. I avoid looking at the shoulders. I never stop unless I absolutely have to. But sometimes, even with everything turned off, I feel my phone vibrate. And I know, without looking, what message waits for me. You left me. The end. True Night Shift Horror Stories. It happened in late January of 2019 at a remote trucking depot outside Billings, Montana, near an industrial stretch of Johnson Lane where the wind cut through the open fields like a blade. The depot operated day and night, but the night shift was always quiet, too quiet, like the world thinned out after midnight. I had been assigned a simple job that night: take an empty flatbed trailer from the depot yard, haul it to a warehouse 15 miles away, load up, and return before sunrise. I'd done the same route dozens of times. But that night, something felt wrong the moment I stepped out of my truck. It was 12:47 a.m. The sky was black, starless, covered with thick winter clouds. The only lights around were the depot's tall halogen lamps, buzzing with a faint metallic hum. Their glow barely reached the outer ends of the lot, leaving long stretches swallowed in darkness. Most of the other drivers were gone. The few who were still working had retreated into their cabs to escape the cutting cold. I walked across the frozen gravel toward my assigned trailer. The crunch of ice under my boots echoed louder than it should have. The air felt unnaturally still, no wind, no movement, no sound. Even the halogen lamps seemed dimmer than usual, flickering in a rhythm that felt almost deliberate. My trailer was parked in the far corner of the lot, next to a chain-link fence where the lights didn't quite reach. As I approached, something about the shadows beside the trailer looked off. They didn't move with my flashlight. They didn't shift when I did. I brushed it off, chalking it up to fatigue, and began my usual inspection. I checked the tires, the brake lines, the floorboards, the locking pins. Everything seemed fine. But the entire time, I felt like someone was watching me from the darkness beyond the fence. When I climbed into the cab and started the engine, my dashboard clock flickered twice. The radio lit up for a split second, even though it was turned off. Static hissed faintly through the speakers. I ignored it and began pulling out of the depot. Halfway toward the warehouse, the road curved through an industrial zone with massive metal storage buildings. Their walls reflected my headlights like pale ghosts rising from the darkness. The cold grew sharper, making the inside of the cab feel like a freezer even with the heat blasting. At exactly 1:21 a.m., as I passed the old rail yard, my high beams caught something in the middle of the road ahead. A man. Standing directly in the lane. I hit the brakes hard, tires skidding on the icy asphalt. The flatbed rattled violently behind me. My heart slammed against my ribs as the headlights froze him in place. He looked wrong. Terribly wrong. His clothes were old-fashioned, dark work pants held by suspenders, a heavy coat with torn sleeves. His skin looked gray in the headlights, stretched tightly across sharp cheekbones. His head hung slightly to the side, as if his neck couldn't support it. But the worst part was his eyes. They reflected nothing. No shine. No movement. Just empty, dark hollows staring straight toward me. I laid on the horn. The man didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't react at all. Fighting the urge to reverse, I grabbed my flashlight, stepped out, and approached him slowly. The cold hit me instantly, burning through my jacket. My breath came out in thick clouds. "Sir?" I called out. "Are you all right?" No answer. I shined the flashlight directly into his face. He didn't blink. Not once. I eased closer, heart pounding. When I reached out to tap his shoulder, my fingers nearly touched fabric. He vanished. Not stepped away. Not ran. Vanished. 1 second he stood there, solid and motionless. The next, he was gone. My breath hitched. The hair on my neck stood straight up. I spun around, scanning the road, the empty rail yard, the fields on either side. No footprints. No movement. No sign anyone had been there. I stumbled back into the cab, slammed the door shut, and locked it. My hands shook violently as I restarted the engine. I drove away as fast as I could safely push the flatbed. But the night wasn't done with me. At the warehouse, the receiving crew was late. The building stood dark and silent, the loading bay lights off. I waited in the cab, tapping my fingers nervously on the wheel. Every few minutes I checked the mirrors. Then, around 1:58 a.m., the passenger side mirror caught something moving behind the trailer. A shape. Tall. Slow. Human-shaped. I froze, watching the mirror. The shape moved closer, walking with stiff, uneven steps. I flicked on my auxiliary rear lights. The figure stopped instantly, as if the light pinned it in place. I leaned forward to look more directly. The figure stood at the edge of the loading bay. The same torn coat. The same stiff posture. The same shadowed eyes. The same man. A cold wave washed through me. He had followed me. "How?" I whispered. "How the hell?" Before I could finish, the figure started moving again, not walking, but drifting. Smooth, silent, gliding toward the driver's side. My skin crawled. I locked the doors even though I knew locks meant nothing to someone who could disappear. He reached the side of the cab. He stopped. And gently placed his hand against the door. The metal groaned under the pressure, denting slightly inward. My breath caught. I could hear something through the door, a faint sound, like slow, ragged breathing. Deep and hollow, as if it came from a chest that hadn't taken a living breath in decades. "Please," I whispered without knowing why. "Just go." The breathing paused. Then a voice, not a whisper, not a growl, but something that barely sounded human at all, murmured through the door. "You left me." I shook violently. No, I don't know you." The voice came again. "You left me, in the dark." Suddenly the cab temperature plummeted. My breath fogged the windshield. The mirrors frosted over instantly, coating with thin sheets of ice. The truck felt like it was sinking into a cold, heavy silence. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. No sound. No cold. No figure. The dent in the door popped outward as if released by an invisible hand. When I dared to check the mirrors, the man was gone. The warehouse lights flickered on moments later. Workers stepped outside, casual and unbothered, waving me toward the bay as if nothing strange had happened. My voice shook as I told the foreman what I'd seen. His expression changed instantly. He stiffened. "Tall? Torn coat?" he asked quietly. I nodded. His skin paled. "You saw the old yard worker." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" He sighed. "Back in the 90s, before they upgraded this place, a maintenance guy used to work nights alone. One shift, he slipped between two trailers while trying to guide a flatbed into the docking lane. The driver didn't see him. Crushed him instantly." I swallowed hard. The foreman continued, voice low. "They say he still wanders the industrial zone at night. Still trying to finish his shift. Still looking for the driver who pulled away without seeing him." I barely slept that morning. When I finally returned to the depot and parked the truck, I checked the passenger door. A handprint. Large. Distorted. Pressed deeply into the metal. Even after cleaning the truck the next day, the shape never fully faded. I sold that truck 5 months later. But the story didn't end there. Because some nights, when I'm driving alone on dark industrial roads, the mirrors flicker with movement.